Okay, so during this scene, we see Catherine assertively confront three people that are trying to make a joke about how one of her fellow police officers was killed on duty. She, instead of just, I guess, speaking to them in a very professional way, as we would consider it, she actually grabs this guy by her manhood, and he is very ashamed afterwards. And she this shows the interaction between rich and poor neighborhoods. And one of the students at Nottingham actually mentioned that this was very prevalent. They brought this to our attention. The fact that they're working on a car, that they're not that they're more upfront about the police presence there. If that was to happen in a nice neighborhood, I imagine that I mean, by U.S. standards, I imagine that it would be the same in England. That people would sort of try and turn their head and act like it's not happening, or sort of talk afterwards. They would be more, I guess, intimidated by the police because the police aren't as common of a presence in well-off neighborhoods. But this is a neighborhood where the three guys that are working on the car are even just. I mean, the fact that they're working on a car even suggests something, right? They're doing it in broad daylight. It's on cinder blocks. It's not in a garage or anything. So that showed the interaction between rich versus poor neighborhoods.
Yeah, and as far as gender, at first these kids are messing around and they're singing because perhaps, we can't assume anything, but perhaps because she is a female police officer, and it's not until she exhibits physically aggressive behaviors that they start to take her seriously. And it's really interesting how after she does that to him, his friends, he gets back in the car and his friends are like, oh, what happened? He doesn't even want to say it. He's almost embarrassed that he was just owned by a woman.
He goes full 180.
Yeah.
But going back to the rich versus poor neighborhoods and like the police presence, the three guys like in the car were like singing a song like while someone else was getting arrested, and like you could just like imagine like how often does that happen for like people to be making a joke about it. Like this community is probably like not very well off, like you said, that like kids are like so comfortable doing that. Something that I noticed.
Yeah, and so let's take a look at another scene from Catherine's work life.
The scene at episode 2 at 36 minutes, the younger cop is intimidated by the politician who she pulls over for what we suspect to be drunk driving. And because she can't exercise the same amount of power that Catherine has in that situation, they're both police officers. They both have the ability to arrest this politician for what he's doing. She calls Catherine to the scene. Catherine is a bit frustrated and afterwards tells, not necessarily in this scene, but afterwards tells her coworker that, that in this police force, she has to be, she meaning her coworker has to be very tough. And Catherine is able to exercise that power throughout the entire series. I mean, that's what this conversation revolves around, right? How does she exercise her power? In this scene, she finds cocaine in the politician's car. The politician is saying, he just starts to say absolutely ridiculous things after she gets to the scene. I'm getting ahead of myself, but she gets to the scene and he starts to say, oh, well, maybe I was hungover and I was driving or something like that. He starts to get a bit frantic. And she thinks, okay, I'm just going to do my job. I'm just going to get this over with and just do it by the book, essentially. And she finds cocaine in his car. She says, all right, you're under arrest. And he starts accusing her of different things, getting very frantic again. He feels like he can say these obscene accusations, like, oh, you may have planted that there, because he is of a higher class. And he even mentions, and it's later a subject of debate between Catherine and her boss, that she... he mentions that he's on the city council, or that he holds a significant political position, and that he is able to, and that he can get better funding for the police officer, something like that. So like, hey, don't arrest me, I'm untouchable, that sort of thing. And Catherine is able to get past that.
And Catherine doesn't have that same economic power to finesse the law. And as we discussed, it's not only how does Catherine assert herself or use her power in situations, but what drives her to do so. And I think a big thing, part of our discussion over the past few weeks has been how, because she personally is invested in the law right now, she's still waiting for justice to see Tommy in jail after what happened to her daughter. Because she has that personal connection to her job, that is that bridge between her personal and work life that we see really come out in these scenes. So that's why we see her get frustrated with this guy who can just try to skirt around the law, and she's like, no, everyone needs to be treated equally. And and it's kind of that gender issue where, let's say if that was a male police officer who had approached her, who had approached the councilman, would he be saying that policeman's bossy, or would he be saying like, oh, that's someone doing their job, I should respect it? So obviously we can't assume anything, but that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, like would he have tried to like get out of the situation, like if it was a man? I feel like because Catherine is a woman, she's already looked down upon, and like by her appearance you can kind of tell like she's of a lower class. So maybe the politician noticed that and was like, oh, like maybe if I mention money or something, I can be able to get out of it. But Catherine was asserting her power and she was like, no, which is, I guess, another class issue.
Yeah, and to bring it back to the main topic of discussion, how does Catherine exercise her power? I think partially due to the fact that she is of a lower working class, not of a very low class, but the fact that she is also a police officer enables her to confidently exercise not only power but also her own opinion in certain situations. The dinner scene with her being able to point out confidently, even though it's an awkward situation and it did make things very tense, and she understood that it would make things tense by the way she said, well, she doesn't make eye contact with anybody, right? When she says, well, Ryan's already my grandson, we already have a grandson, we're already grandparents. It gets very tense, but she says that confidently. It's not like she just blurts it out impulsively. She points that out as if it's something that she was not expecting, but she was expecting to have to defend Ryan because he wasn't expected to come. I don't think in a scene before that, when they're talking about whether or not Ryan was invited to the dinner, it's implied that Ryan was not invited to the dinner, and because something happens, I think she says for some reason his friends canceled. He couldn't go to his friend's house, so he had to come to dinner, and Ryan is like, oh, I brought you chocolates, and it should have been like a, oh, thank you so much thing. It's I mean, personally that's what I would have done, but instead it gets very tense. just because he's there. Catherine is able to she's able to be more confident and more strong because she holds a position as a police officer and she's experienced in dealing with these very touchy subjects, and part of that comes from because she has to have faith in the law, because she is still waiting, like you said, she's still waiting for justice, so she has to, and in a way she has to become that justice that was lacking in the situation with her daughter being raped, and for her to have to raise her daughter's son.
Yeah, so maybe unlike other officers, she has that personal investment, and that like is what sets her apart from other characters in the story, and other characters in the story, because other characters, with all the other characters, money is everything, and for Catherine, we see that money is not everything, and that's what I think makes her stronger.
Yeah.